Okay guys, today I'm going to talk a little bit about for those health conditions that have physical disabilities and the benefit of specifically equine activities. Okay. Personally, what I'm going to go into is my own personal experience after I had surgery. So if you can see my scar right there, I had ulnar nerve surgery. So think of it as your funny bone. It had gotten compressed from an accident, and so they had to do decompression surgery to move that nerve. And for me not to have what was happening was I was losing feeling in my hand. And as a left-hander, that was a severe problem. So they went in and did this surgery. They actually moved the nerve in front here and closed it up. After surgery, you will go through a period where, or at least I did, where you can't really do a lot because that skin needs to heal. But eventually you've got to get moving, or you're going to be looking at where you'll have restrictions, particularly in like joints and things like that. So you've got to get moving at some point. Particularly as a type 1 diabetic, exercise and movement is essential, particularly for circulation in my limbs, okay? So that was extremely important to me. Usually your doctor, or at least in my case for my surgeries, has always prescribed afterwards physical therapy. So I worked with my physical therapist and my doctor to when I could get released to go ahead and start doing the horse-related activities. So that's always kind of a step leading into, particularly when you're in an outside environment with a healing wound, okay? So that's one thing that's extremely important. So the goal was, as I get a transition from the physical therapy to outside horse activities, is to start moving. What I liked about doing the equine therapy was the fact that I was not feeling like I was doing physical therapy. So I called it physical torture rather than physical therapy, because it was hard work and you felt like you were working. Here I didn't. So, and first things, it wasn't riding at first, it was coming and actually doing activities, grooming your horse and tacking your horse. So I'm going to go through a couple of things that were prescribed to me. Again, it really depends on the surgery, you as yourself, but just some things to kind of keep in mind. So here's a curry comb. This is used for getting the dirt off of the horse. Different from a brush, it's used in a circular motion. So again, as you see, this is my surgery arm. I'm doing kind of a unique type of movement and going ahead and stretching that arm out as I work my way down. Now then, after you do your curry comb, you'll come back with a brush, a dandy brush, and you'll go ahead and brush which of the hair you picked up. This is in a different motion, so it's this flipping type of motion. And again, it's working. I can feel it working on that elbow. Couple of things also, because my nerve was compressed, I started to lose feeling in my hand. So I actually had to even go into occupational therapy. So even just like the flicking and holding the different types of grooming tools worked really well with my occupational therapy, holding these different types of tools. So that's another thing. It kind of was a 2-for-1 basis. Another thing, I had some complications. I actually got staph infection into my surgery wound, so I didn't get to start physical therapy till later. And of course, being a diabetic, being a woman, being a little bit older, I also got what was called frozen shoulder, because this was so immobile. And so to this day, I'm still kind of right here, is about as high as I can go. So again, by having, like, for example, a taller horse, that gets me stretching and using that shoulder a little bit more, and stretching up, okay? And again, it doesn't really feel, so I might crawl my fingers up and feel like the top of his withers. To me, it doesn't feel like, I'm not thinking of this as therapy. Even some other things, for example, like brushing their mane and tail. I can come over here and I can work on brushing from the side, of course, because I don't want to get kicked. But again, I'm using a different motion on my shoulder and my elbow, not to mention I'm gripping with a different type of brush. So those were all things that were very supportive of from my physical therapist. The other thing then, so a lot of times I'll braid up my horse's tail and put him in a tail bag. And so this was great, again, going back to the occupational therapy, to practice braiding up that tail by doing a simple braid as such. And notice your fingers, you got to get your fingers just right. And trust me, right after my surgery, even after I had healed, from the staph infection. I was in physical therapy. Things like this were very difficult with this left hand and using my fingers. I dropped things quite a bit, and so things as simple as braiding the tail really were things that are really hard. Probably the most frustrating, and I'm still having problems with that, is handling the rubber band. So I'm still working on that. So you see, I want to try to use my right hand, but I at least try to get my left hand in. Whoop, and I busted it. But you can see, and again, that's because I'm pulling, so I just don't know my hands yet on there. So again, these are still things that I'm working on. And while I'm on with the horse, even if I'm just petting on them, I'm still working. I'm still using my tactile senses, working on developing that along with the range of motion in my elbow and my shoulder. Other things, so we'll have over here assisting me will be hoof picking, will be, if you notice, I'm having him pick up the hoof. That's still really hard, especially if a horse struggles, for me to do that. So I have someone that helps me. And then I just work on picking. And again, a couple of things to notice. So again, I'm using it in a different motion. So it's working both of those while he holds, so I'm not putting a lot of weight on it. And I'm also using a different tool that is very challenging for, again, as I'm trying to rebuild that hand after that compressed nerve. So this is a great exercise that I found. Again, you got to be safe and have someone strong holding it, and have a horse that's good about doing it. But that's a good option for you. So again, just basic grooming activities, using the tools and everything has really been very useful for individuals like me that are recovering after surgery. Okay, so let's talk about saddling, and as I'm recovering from particularly surgery or any type of, especially arm-related physical conditions. So, you know, again, with trying to get my range of motion back after my ulnar nerve decompression surgery, along with my frozen shoulder, it's very important that you work on range of motion, but you don't want to overdo it. So saddle pad, again, is really easy for lifting. It's not real heavy. Again, different size horses, so this is a little taller, so I'm going to have to actually work a little harder to put it up a little more. When I first got started, and again, you can see I lift up here. I'm proud that I can get up this high. When I first got started, I couldn't do but maybe an English saddle pad, something a little lighter, on a much shorter horse. So again, that's something we're working on. But now the saddle pad's a great place to start. But then for the saddle, it's still just a lot for me. You can look at big Western saddles being about 50 pounds. That's a lot. And so again, I can assist, but I'm not going to sit there and overdo myself with it. So there's a couple of things we can do with the saddling process. So we'll come on over. I'll have my assistant do the saddling. I can assist by kind of helping with the back. And then I will get over here. So I'll come and do some of the rest of the stuff. So I can go ahead and lift up on that right here. And that lifting motion is extremely helpful for me. So just lifting up the pad to get a little airway in there. Same thing as I come over to my horse. I can come to the other side and then stretch up and pull down the other pieces. Again, that's working my elbow. And also my elbow and my shoulder. Same thing, so then as I'm working on being able to really work my fingers, working with this latigo, or even if you've got an English saddle, working with the buckles is extremely helpful. And I'm not going to just buckle this cinch. I'm going to actually do what's called a Texas T, because it's a little more challenging for me for my fingers. Again, like I said, with that rubber band, when I go ahead and rubber band, that's really hard. So this is really good because it makes me have to use, after that decompression surge, or after that nerve had gotten compressed, I really lost a lot of function in my fingers. So I found even with this Texas T, so I've weaved it in and out. I'm going to take and get through, kind of think of it like a men's tie if you've never done one. I'm going to bring it around here and come around here. And then notice how I'm having to get my fingers up in here. So again, that's challenging, and then bring it back down. So this is a really great for me, getting to really use my fingers. Trust me, right after all of this, it was really hard. And so I've gotten much better on that. But again, like I said, I'm still well over a year or so after my surgery, and I'm still not doing the saddles, but I'm working up to it. I can do some of the other things to really help with my recovery process. Okay guys, so moving on, we went ahead and groomed and saddled our horse. Now we get on him, and so again the goal is I want to try to rehab this elbow that I had surgery on, and then the frozen shoulder because I stayed so inactive. So again, one of the things that I found really helpful is I'm on a neck reining horse, so I can challenge this hand, but if I get tired, I can also go to the other hand, okay? So then that way then, if this gets really, so I can go ahead and let it rest for a bit. If you notice, it's got rubber bands here, so I could go ahead if I wanted to do some exercises, or I wanted to go, like if he's being led and or I drop accidentally, I know I've got where it's not gonna, the reins aren't gonna drop. No, we're not going to eat. Again, ideally you don't want, and I've graduated up to him from our old 25-year-old horse. He's got a little more pull on him, but I couldn't use him the first time. So that's one of the things you'll kind of gradual, but this is a great, think about it. So if I want to work both hands equally, I can go to, you know, two-handed, and I can pull back and release. Let's say if I want to back him up, I'm gonna go ahead and back him up. I pull back, sit back. There you go. And I'm pulling back with that elbow. Also for fingering, like if I want to really work the dexterity of my fingers, if I want to get his head down, I can sit there and kind of go back and forth to work on putting his head down. So again, I can do that. And so those are just some of the things that I can do as I'm working with this horse. And again, he's a little more challenging than my dead-headed 25-year-old, so I didn't start with him when I was rehabbing back, but I'm working up to it, okay? You never want to overdo as you're first getting started, and I consulted the whole entire time with my physical therapist. We worked on things like maybe circling, for example. So if I wanted to circle the horse one way, so the right, or if I wanted to circle, let's say I'm going to come to the left, I'm going to circle to the left, I'm going to go ahead and I'll move out. And again, I can use those reins for pulling out and in, and that's really working those elbows and shoulders. But again, the first time I got on, my physical therapist just like, go straight, hold as much as you can. If you need to, you know, then just, you know, let someone else lead you around that first couple of times. So I built up to that, and that's the most important thing, is building up. You don't want to overdo it. I always wanted to do my challenging exercises with my physical therapist and then get his feedback on where to go next. So consult with your doctor, your physical therapist. If you're like me, who also had an occupational therapist, consult with them. And continuously do that as you're working your way up. And ideally, if you've got someone that's got experience as an equine assisted activities and therapy instructor that's worked with people rehabbing after surgery, that's a great place to start too. So again, take your time and enjoy. But like I tell you, for me personally, doing the horse stuff just didn't feel like physical therapy, and so it was a great way to make me feel better, both physically and also emotionally. So have fun.